Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got another good episode for you today. I know I'm sitting a little closer to the camera, where the camera is a little bit closer to me than usual. I'm moving some stuff around here in the office, and I might switch things up just a little bit. So we're going to see. Now I got to figure out if I'm going to look at the monitor, or if I'm going to look at the laptop, or if I'm going to look at the camera. So just made things more difficult for myself. But anyway, today we are joined by Tim, and I'm not going to give a whole lot of detail about this one, other than we're going to talk about some UFO phenomena, entities, and biblical connections. That's how the email read, and I've been in contact with this guy for a long time. I think we've been friends on Facebook for quite a while, and he's always got some great insight. You know, he'll message me from time to time, and I truly appreciate what he has. So I look forward to this conversation. If you have an experience that you would like to share, holler at me at thebumppodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach me on the Bump phone, or right here. That number is 304-812-0553. If you would like to send anything to the show, whatever, there's no cursed objects or anything like that, nothing weird, I don't get into that. You can send it to the Bump Podcast at P.O. Box 1453, Chapmanville, West Virginia 25508. And if you send something, I'll probably send back, some decals or something like that as a thank you. And also, this is brand new at the time of recording this. Hopefully I'll get this episode out in time for you to order it if you want to. There is a Sticker Mule store for the Bump Podcast right now, where you can buy sticker packs, and you can even buy the logo T-shirt. Now, I'm looking for things to start maybe in the new year, to open another online store, maybe revamp the website, get it up and running again like it's supposed to be. But right now it's like stickermule.com/the Bump Podcast, and pick through there and see what you like. All right, let's go ahead and bring Tim on. I hope everybody's having a happy holiday season. And hopefully by the time we start talking to Tim, I'll not be jumbling up my words. All right, let's go ahead and bring him on. All right. We're on, buddy. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you, man. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has. It has. I've seen your stuff. I've been watching you from afar for a while, mainly because you've been doing this longer than I have. That's one reason, but also I found out about you, I think kind of early on, just seeing you on other podcasts. And I want to say, well, here's the thing. I don't remember what the first podcast is that I heard you on, but I remember the story, because you're on, and I want to say you were talking about something to do with going to see this witch, and her house was like haunted, and I think she could call in Bigfoot. Is that correct?
I talked to a lady. She wasn't a witch though, but she said she had a relationship with Bigfoot. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully I didn't just mess that up, but I think that's the story, because I don't know, I found your podcast from a story like that somehow.
Yeah. I've been doing this for almost 5 years. So we're closing in on 5 years now. And yeah, I've been on I was on Tony's show a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Appalachian Intelligence, Justin Brown show. Prometheus Lens. I've been on a lot of shows. My first one though was I think the first show I landed was Sasquatch Chronicles, and that was huge for me personally, man, because I love Wes Germer.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. But
That's top 5 for me.
yeah, for
That show
sure,
is top 5 for me. Love
for
that
sure.
show.
He's been doing it forever, and he's just such a nice person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just a really, really good guy, man. Can't say enough about him. Um,
I
you
think
were
maybe Confessionals was probably where I heard you the first time.
may
And
have been.
like I haven't heard whatever story it was you're telling, I haven't heard it in like a couple of years. But I remember it had to do with a lady and Bigfoot. And it was so compelling that I paused the show and I went and found your podcast because I
Thank you.
didn't want to like forget, so I went and I found your podcast and I hit play on an episode. And then I went back and listened to you finish that story, but I wanted you up in my Spotify like library of like recent plays so I could go back and find your show. So
I appreciate it, man. I really do. That's
you've
awesome.
got some epic shows in your library. It's crazy.
Thanks, brother. I tell people that, like, when I say people, I mean mainly my wife. I'm like, I got the content. I just need the audience, and I refuse to pay for any kind of ad space. And I don't know. I don't push it real hard. I just go where the
Mhm.
Lord leads it, and in His time, it'll happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on the same page with that too. I mean, when I got into this, I'm just not a very technical guy. I do not like spending long periods of time behind a computer or behind a phone. Like I had almost checked out of social media altogether. And I felt this, I felt just kind of pulled to start to podcast that, I was kind of like, I was fighting it for a while because I felt like I needed to start a show and I fought it. And the biggest hurdle for me was just messing with stuff on the computer.
Yeah, yeah, same here.
And
I'm no good at it.
yeah, I've had to learn everything and like I say, I was about to delete my social media stuff because I was just fed up with it. And when I started the show, I decided to keep all that stuff because it's a good way to get in touch with people. So and I'm glad I did because I mean, that's how you and I started talking was through, I think, an Instagram message.
Probably. Yeah.
So, it's worked out. It's been beneficial for me, but man, I have to limit myself to how much time I spend on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I take
So,
breaks, man. Like, I try to go like sometimes a week, sometimes it's 5 days. But
mhm.
I find myself, if I get bogged down, I'll go down rabbit holes or whatever, and I'm just like start not liking the world and stuff like that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's like cut it
that's
off,
it.
just
That's
cut it
it.
off.
Yep, that's it, man. I mean, yeah, the only reason why I'm still messing around with computers to do this podcasting, but it's been worth it. I mean, and I think too, I think we are, I don't know, I think like for 2020, like that was the catalyst for me. I got red pill really hard in 2020 and it changed everything. Because as I'm starting to wake up to the world around me, it became it became very clear to me that the only place where I was hearing the truth was a podcast, and the only place that I was ever going to be able to talk about stuff like this, like what's swirling around in my head, is if I start a podcast.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, dude. Because now I got red pilled probably 2008, I think it was. Uh, I was still in the Air Force, and it was me and a couple of higher ranking guys, like a tech sergeant at the time and a master sergeant. They called me into the flight office and just kind of kicked it. We started talking about stuff, and they started talking about all the things that were really going on in the world. And like, you don't really believe this and that, do you? I'm like, yeah, I just kind of accepted things, on face value. And they're like, have a seat. We just dug into conspiracy, and it ruined me. in a big way for a long time, and so I shared that with my wife, and I ruined her too. So now now we can't watch
Yeah.
movies, we can't listen to music hardly,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh,
2008, man, I was definitely still a half normie, if we're going to use that term.
yeah,
I don't mean that in a bad way towards anybody who's not on the same page we are. But anyway, I was still kind of half just a normal guy in 2008. But I'll tell you this, I loved Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
yes.
And I don't know if you remember this show, but I used to watch this show called Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura.
I watched a couple episodes of that. Yeah, man.
And that was like around that '08, somewhere in between '08 and 2012, probably when I was watching that.
Yeah,
So I've always kind of had my foot like halfway in this world, but it took 2020 to really just break me in. And like I say, man, seriously, like the only place that I was hearing the truth was on podcasts. It's the only place.
yeah, for sure, for sure. That was a hard wake up for a lot of people, and I think it backfired. Whatever was supposed to have happened, the opposite happened. People found their way
Yes.
back to Christ. People started researching things for themselves.
Hmm.
People had a lot of downtime, and so they were able to think a little bit for themselves. And I don't mean that in a bad way either, but you know, we tend to rely on news sources. We tend to rely on just the mainstream everything. And we work and we come home, we want to be entertained. So we just turn on whatever and we're blind to it all.
Yeah.
But podcasts and downtime just kind of unlock that door. And it's been really ugly reality, but
Mhm.
we needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I knew instinctively, and I thank the Lord for this. I knew going into 2020 that something wasn't right. And I got clued in to certain things early on. There's certain things that they tried to make us do that I didn't do. And I'm glad I didn't.
Same here.
But it was the podcast that helped me navigate all that at the end of the day. There was some strange spiritual instinctual thing that kind of kept me good. But what got me straight and to the other side of that was certainly podcasts. And you said research. uh in 2020, that's when I started researching,
Yeah, man.
and I just never stopped.
Yeah.
I wanted a place where I could come put some of my findings out there to people. That's been a big thing for me. Like the podcast has really helped me get some of my research out there. And also, like, I wanted to create a place where we could talk hidden history, alternative theories, supernatural in like an unfiltered way without agenda.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's great to be able to meet other people, right? This is the best part, is getting to meet these other podcasters like yourself, who've had like maybe we're on the same page about a lot of stuff, and it's nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude. Absolutely. Again, back to Wes Germer. I
Mm.
believe it was him. I think it was his show that I first heard Dr. Michael Heiser come on. And when Mike Heiser started explaining things, I'll tell you now, I think it was 2019, I didn't even have a Bible at the house. There might have been one in storage or something at that time, but I had drifted so far away, that for like a couple of years I was working my way back, but I was like, oh, hold on. Let me let me look
Yeah,
this, let me dig in, so
yeah,
and that got me into my Bible.
yeah.
And it's just like everything blew up from there on. So
Wow, I mean, you said Michael Heiser, and that's key, man. I mean, I was going to bring that up actually. I mean, I could probably just jump into this since you
yeah,
brought him up. I was going to wait and like kick it with you a little bit, but what's happened to me recently is I started the podcast about a year ago, and uh I decided I was going to read through the Bible in its entirety.
yeah,
So I've been doing that. And I've been taking my time with it, and just whenever I hit, I told Justin Brown this the other day, man, when I hit that verse about Esau coming out of the womb, Harry, I stopped.
Mhm.
Like when I come across stuff like that, I'll stop and I'll look into it. And so I got to Psalms recently, and something told me go back to Deuteronomy. And I put it off. And then the next day, again, I had this. I was like, why am I feeling like I got to go back to Deuteronomy? So I went back, and I was like, I think it's because I need to go back and make sure I read what I thought I read in there.
Yeah.
And it's that stuff about the divine council that blew my mind.
Yeah.
So I get back into Deuteronomy. I hit Deuteronomy 32.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this is why I'm back in Deuteronomy. Because I'm still in I'm in this place where I'm still kind of wrapping my head around this divine council thing. But so I did that, and then I jumped back into Psalms. As soon as I jump into Psalms, I'm right around Psalm 80. I hit Psalm 82.
Yes.
Boom, divine counsel again.
Yeah.
And then I keep going, and then I get to Psalm 89, and it's like 6 through 7. It says, "For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord?" And then it says, "He is a God feared in the council of the holy ones." And I'm
Mm.
back at divine council again. And it says, "Great and awesome amount all who are around him." So, and I know, so we talked on Instagram, and we were talking about the UFO thing.
Right.
I think this has got to fit into it somehow. For me, it's like there's more out there. God is almighty. He is, it says, great and awesome are those who are around him, just because they're in his presence almost. So, and then in that same passage, a few verses later, I get to I think it's verse 10, and it says, "You rule the raging of the sea. You crushed Rahab like a carcass, and you scattered your enemies with your mighty arm." And I'm thinking Rahab. And I remember back in Job, I came across Rahab, and it was mentioned in a heavenly context. And I think that that was a planet.
Yes.
I think that the writer in Psalms and Job, the way they talk about Rahab, it indicates that there was some sort of a cosmic war or dimensional war, or however you want to put it, a war in space, and God crushed it, and it scattered whoever was on that planet across, I don't know, the galaxy and or the heavens, really. So at least that means people were on that planet and they went to other planets, is what, that's how I'm reading this, right? So I had the thought, like, it seems like there were other civilizations on other planets who scattered, and maybe they had some sort of transportation like spaceships. Now, am I losing my mind here, or what? Because I know it's going to sound crazy to people, but that's how this is coming reading for me.
Dude, tell me all about it, man, because I hadn't considered that at all. I'm all in.
Okay. Well, so I asked Justin Brown about it last week, about Rahab being a planet. I just wanted to get his thoughts on it. And he said he had to look into it, but he had heard that other people say this. I think he said Timothy Alberino has a whole series on it, on Rahab being a planet. So I don't think I'm the only one. And he was at least familiar with it. And I don't know. That just started making sense to me,
Yeah.
that there, because there's a it's in other myths as well. It's in Sumerian text, Babylonian text, Akkadian text. They talk about this cosmic war. The Sumerians had this accurate map of the solar system. They had an extra planet they called Tiamat. In that legend, Tiamat was basically blown up, and it mirrors what this story in Psalms, in my opinion. I think in the Sumerian text, they're calling it Tiamat. In the Bible, they're calling it Rahab. And even in modern science today, even secular scientists agree that we're missing a planet and that it was once where that asteroid belt is right now.
Which would make sense if it was blown up, right?
Mm-hmm. So
Wow.
I've got all this kind of swirling around, and I think too, in the Bible, where it talks about principalities, my interpretation of that is that those are other realms governed by non-human entities who have been around for a long time, perhaps even since the time of this planet Rahab, even.
Wow.
So, according to the Bible, in my opinion,
Right.
there's life in the universe,
Wow.
and
Oh,
it's right there in the scripture.
yeah. I'm gonna have to look in that too, man.
Yeah,
That's all.
Rahab's cool.
Yeah, that because I've heard Rahab mentioned, and I've
Mhm.
probably heard Alberino talk about that, but I'll be honest, I don't listen to a whole lot of Tim Alberino stuff. I did for the first 5 or 6 times he was on Blurry Creatures, and now I was just like, okay, I think I've heard what he had to say, and you know
Mhm.
what I mean. I kind of moved on,
Yeah,
but um, not to discredit the guy. The guy does
sure.
research, and he goes out in the field a lot. Um, but
Well, I haven't heard what he has to say on Rahab, but I did go and look, and it is out there. He has done at least one podcast where he is saying that he thinks that that was a planet as well. So there's that, and it's a cool rabbit hole. I mean, I just I've always, well, since I started reading scripture, I keep coming across these little indicators that there was a cosmic war before, like Adam and Eve,
mm,
before, just I'll say before Adam and Eve. There was something going on that kind of, I guess, knocked things out of whack with all these entities.
well,
So, and like, furthermore, when I was in Deuteronomy, I also came across Deuteronomy 17:2. It says, the Israelites are not to worship other gods
mm-hmm,
or the host of heaven,
yeah,
or the punishment's going to be severe. So I was thinking about that too. And I'm like, well, the punishment, if the punishment is severe, that means that these are probably real, right? Like, the Israelites aren't going to face punishment for communing with like an imaginary fiction.
right, yeah. See, I've always just viewed principalities um, as who's in the divine council, whether they are good or bad. Like Michael
Mhm.
in Daniel, he's referred to as the Prince of
Mhm.
Israel, right? And so I look at him as he's the principality over that region, and it's kind of why they will never fail. He that's God's people, but he's a pretty tough dude. And I would look at other principalities as maybe even some of the fallen that are over these regions, these bad guys, you
Mhm.
know. But I hadn't considered them being outside, in the actual in the heavens, controlling it from there. I don't know why I look at it like they're more of like they're closer,
Yeah. Hmm.
or is there room for them to be closer in your view? Like,
Yes.
do they go from Rahab? Are they here on Earth?
Yes. I think both. And I'm going to probably touch on that soon
Yeah, man.
with you today, because I wanted to talk about this celestial stuff first too, because it's like I don't hear it talked about much. And also, this is just thesis stuff that I'm throwing out here. I think it's all, I think it's both, Bo. I
Okay.
do. And back, and even in the old myths, Sumerians and Akkadians and all that, like these little G gods,
Mhm.
they are assigned their own planet. And in some of the alchemical texts that I've read, the alchemists were calling upon this group of entities that were assigned their own section of the cosmos.
Wow.
There's just a huge dense history here in myths and in the alchemical legends of these beings having their own section of space essentially. And like I know some people don't, they have a hard time with space. You can take space out and just call it another dimension or another realm if you want,
Right.
whatever. So I would argue for sure that there's another dimension or more dimensions. We don't have to go down that road, but I think that's what DMT culture and ayahuasca culture, that's all about. That those drugs enable people to step into that other dimension and still talk to these entities too. So it could be space, it could be just another dimension. I don't know, but yeah, they're here too because you have the Watchers in the mix here.
Right.
I think this is huge for me, man. The Watchers, they come down to Mount Hermon. They're said to be locked in the earth, right? So, like Azazel, he's a Watcher who Raphael locked up in a hole in the desert.
Right.
Azazel was responsible for teaching humans advanced technology. And I'm wondering if that's something that's starting back up right now as well. Like there's a program guiding human technology involving Semyaza and Ishtar specifically.
Yeah.
That's where my research has kind of taken me.
Well, look, to talking about technology, I think there is such a nugget, and I've talked about this a few times, but it bears repeating big time too. In Genesis 4, you take, and I'm from Southern West Virginia, so my pronunciation of some of these names might be off. All right, but you take Lamech or Lamech or however, but it talks about him in Genesis 4, and it lists his sons. That's where you get Jubal and Tubal Cain and stuff like that. Those guys. It lists their names and that they were masters of these different crafts, of music and blacksmithing and tent making and all this stuff. But then it lists his daughter, which is very rare. Her name was Nama, or I heard somebody else call it Naamah, but it's Naamah, maybe. But Nama, it lists her name too. And Lamech is talking about how he's such a bad dude, that he's killed he's killed a man before, and he had two wives. I think it was the first time that was mentioned. And so he's doing all these things against God. And then his sons are the masters of all these crafts, and his daughter was listed. There's, and I got my notes laying over there somewhere, but one of these ancient texts, when they list the women who were, they called them the mothers of demons, the ladies that are mentioned in Genesis 6:4, in my opinion, the wives of the fallen, and that would be Lilith. But one of the names is Nama. And so I think in Genesis 4, it's giving you a little hint that this is the same lady, or not really a lady, but it's the same woman that was taken by the fallen, and her family was given these gifts, these technologies. And I think it's where it all came from.
Wow.
But that's just something that I've dug into.
Is that Genesis 4?
Yeah, Genesis 4.
Wow.
Let me see here.
That's incredible, man. I think we might be at a crossroads too with our research here. Actually, I'm kind of excited about this because
me too, man.
This is stuff I have not even come across, man. I've never heard of Nama.
Yeah, Genesis 4:22, I think, is where it's at.
Cool.
But yeah, and there's like 4 different names. I would butcher them all if I said them, because they got some really weird names. But one of them is Lilith, one of them is Nama, and I'm not seeing it right off the bat here, but there's 2 other ladies that are mentioned. But the other women I haven't found in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that correlation with this ancient text lists her name, and then I see her name in Genesis 4 with these gifts from these bad guys. And I thought, advanced technology.
Yep.
But yeah, I do think it's happening again now because
I think so too.
yeah, look at the exchange, and we all hear the rumors that, well, maybe not all of us, but I've definitely heard rumors that our government, America and elsewhere, has an exchange program with aliens. We let them abduct X amount of people. We have so many kids missing or whatever,
Yeah.
but we have these huge advances in technology now.
Yeah. That we're on the same page. And that's exactly where my research took me. And it took me specifically to 1947.
Yes.
And I'm just going to just humor me because I'm going to list off a couple things here. But I think all the stuff I'm about to mention here is this catalyst for change that has molded the world that we're living in right now. 1947, Book of Enoch was found in a cave with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Until that point, it had kind of been forgotten about. Maybe it was in Ethiopia. Maybe it was taken out of the Bible in the 5th century. I don't know. Something happened, but in 1947, it's reintroduced to the world. And it's providential in the way that it begins to resurface because the first few lines contain a prophecy that the book itself was meant to be found later for a later generation. Enoch 2:1 says, not for this generation, but for a remote one to come. And it's all, yeah, it's almost like John or Enoch had a John style or John from Revelation style vision about this future group of people. So that's why I'm throwing this in here because we might be that future group of people.
Absolutely. And look what else happened in 1947. Isn't that when Hiroshima happened?
Yes, that's
And
part of it. Yep.
um,
The 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 yes, that's big. That's big. So the next thing I'm going to come back to Hiroshima. Actually,
okay.
this is the main thing I wanted to drive is that I don't think it's a coincidence that Enoch's found in 47 at almost the exact moment that Israel was in the process of becoming a nation.
Yes.
They became a nation officially in 1948, but the talks began in 47. And there's this crazy story. If this is how tight this thing lines up, there's a story about this guy who got a hold of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Enoch. They pulled it out of the desert. He's the first eyes on it. He's going to decide whether or not it's legit. And that same night that he's looking at the scroll, the UN is having a talk about bringing Israel in as a nation.
That's so cool.
And I see Israel becoming a nation as prophecy being fulfilled personally.
Yep.
And I just don't think it's a coincidence that this book shows up on the eve almost of this. And there's
Do you know
there's
what
all
month?
this not I don't have it with me right now.
Okay. And I know that's neither here nor there. I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's so many things. 47 is so big.
Yeah, it's big. There's way more too. It's way more. And like I say, man, I can find that month for people and send it to you. But Israel was 48 officially, but 47 they're talking about it. They're having these UN meetings. So um, Roswell is another big one, 1947, because the reason why we're having this conversation right now about UFOs and aliens and why it's in the news and why it's in these hearings and stuff like that is because the public's relationship with UFOs and alien life officially begins in 1947 because of
Yes.
Kenneth Arnold and Roswell. So that's huge. And then also they made the CIA in 1947. The Air Force was officially established in 1947.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Because you were there, you know.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about that is they waited until 47 to create this Air Force. And it's crazy because they didn't establish it during World War II. They waited until 47 because Truman signed the National Security Act creating the Air Force, July 26th, I think, of 1947. That was 20 days after Roswell.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking maybe that's not a coincidence either.
exactly. Yeah, for sure, dude. That's what I'm saying. Because while you were talking, I wrote down, I was like, Air Force, Roswell.
Yep.
You know, all of this stuff happens. Um, and going back to the big bomb, you know,
Yeah, the bomb.
um, I saw, and it's just here recently since the UAP hearings that happened on like the 13th of this month, just a couple weeks ago. Um, they started talking about possible, um, I'll say bases for lack of a better word, under the oceans. You know, because we see
Yep.
these USOs and they come up from the ocean and stuff. And I saw some other people posting like, is this why we do our nuclear tests in the ocean? You know, are they really not tests, or are things? Is there a war now
Mm.
that they've just been masking? You know,
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, actually.
it's crazy.
There's two really wild UFO crashes involved with them with bombs. There was one the British set off, and they set it off in the ocean, and there was a rumored crash on this island in northern Germany. That's just one that's coming to mind. Then there's a couple other ones. So yeah, it does make you think. It's like a Operation High Jump or something. They said that was like a scientific expedition, but they lost men and planes.
Right.
So, um, oh, speaking of World War II, also in 1947, the Nazis are integrating into the US and Europe and Russia with all their tech.
Yeah.
And I think that that tech would lead up to the creation of the internet,
Oh,
because
wow.
the guy who first built a particle collider, he did that for the Nazis. After the war, he went to work at CERN.
Mm.
And then CERN starts working on the internet. They develop the internet and they roll it out first. CERN does. The people with the particle collider rolled out the internet first. So that's all connected to this too. So I think our internet technology is connected to this year. Also, I can't forget this part: fiber optics and circuitry, which would help build computers and help, connect this maze of stuff that's happening. So there is an internet that mysteriously comes out in 1947 as well.
Really?
Yes,
Wow.
there's people who have done like extensive research, like Linda Moulton Howe. They say that fiber optic circuitry stuff comes out of Roswell, out of the 1947 Roswell event. So either way, it comes out in 1947.
Yeah,
So
man. That's so interesting.
I had to throw CERN in because I think I think that deserves a spot at the table here, because it's like Roswell. CERN is involved with contact to other others, the other side.
Yeah.
And that's coming from CERN's own people. It's just like Oak Ridge out here, man. Like, it's the people that work there are the people who are leaking this information, that they're making contact with these other entities. It's supposed to be this big internet rumor that CERN is like, oh, blowing holes in dimensions and talking to entities, but that is coming from people who work there, which I can lay that out another time if you want, because that's a whole other rabbit hole. But it is coming from scientists and people who work at these facilities. So you see where this is going, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's all coming back to this year. And I think too, like, I came across this guy recently named Rudolf Steiner, who he's an old, he comes out of Germany actually, um, late 1800s, early 1900s. He's in kind of like this occult German subculture scene that would eventually become the Thule Society, which would become the Nazi Party. But that's a whole other thing. But anyway, he has this idea of the eighth sphere, which is a web of entities that he said would be connected to our future technology and our virtual reality. He thought that advanced technology would break into our timeline and that it would be the greatest challenge for humanity because it was going to, he said it was going to come to Earth and latch itself onto AI.
Wow.
And he had it a term for it. He called it astral intelligence.
Really?
Yeah, but it's this, it's a merger of ET intelligence with our AI. That's the whole, and get this though, he attributed this eighth sphere to the Elohim.
What?
Yeah. He used that word to describe a group of these intelligences, and it sounds a lot like the divine council from the verses we talked about earlier. And look, I'm just throwing it out here as food for thought. I don't agree with him. I don't think on this.
Right.
I just think it's a weird connection.
That is. And this was like 100+ years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is late at the earliest because he died in 1923, I think. So yeah, it was. I think he brought the eighth sphere out right around the turn of the century.
Man.
This idea, and he uses that word, Bo. He uses Elohim.
I wonder where he was getting his information from.
He was he was an occultist.
Yeah.
He was
Talking to him.
yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do too.
That whole, there was a huge subculture. The biggest occult hub that's probably ever been was in Germany in the late early 1900s.
Hmm.
That's what the Nazis were born out of. This
Yeah.
huge occult revolution that nobody ever talks about.
Well, didn't Hitler go around collecting all these occultic
Yeah.
relics and stuff, some kind of throne or something in gates?
He was given speeches from the throne of Pergamon, which is Zeus's throne, which in the book of Revelation, I think John calls Zeus's throne the throne of Satan.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
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 So, especially if we're going to agree with Michael Heiser, we might differ on Steiner and how we see the role of this council. But Steiner was at least acknowledging them as a part of this A sphere. And I found all this and I thought, man, I need to pay more attention to Enoch, the book of Enoch, because it seems like it was reintroduced to man when it was for a reason.
Right.
And I'm just getting beat over the head with this idea that it emerges the same time as Roswell, and the same time that this is starting to become a discussion to the public that there's something else out there, UFOs, aliens, all that stuff. So I kind of revisited the book of Enoch because of all this. And I actually I went back and found that curse, because there's an ancient curse in the Enoch concerning the release of these watchers. And I just kind of had this thought, like, I wonder if the curse is going to be up in our lifetime.
Wow.
Because when these things are released, they're going to start gearing up for war. Right? These watchers, these fallen angels, when they get out, it's going to be, they might not come out like cutting people down on the streets. They might be behind the scenes gearing up for war first, like putting down battle plans. And it's like, it seems like that's where some of the people in our government want to go with this. Like Elizondo said the other day that this was a secret UFO arms race.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's connected, but just to break it down for people, that watcher curse in Enoch, God tells the Archangel Michael to lock up Semyaza and the watchers in the earth for 70 generations. And after those 70 generations, they are to be set free, which that, of course, correlates with Genesis 6 in the Bible and everything that happened there. So I did the math on that, and it's compelling. I don't know that I have this down in a way where it's going to be going to translate over a podcast, but I can walk through it for a second. It's
Yeah, man, I love it.
okay. So I took 70 times 70 because I took Psalm 91, I think. Psalm 90, verse 10, I think it says a generation is 70 years. So I used that in there, and I took 70 years times 70 generations, and that's 4,900 years.
Mhm.
And the curse was placed in the time of Jared. So I used that. That means that the curse was placed somewhere between 2,582 BC to 3,544 BC. That means that Jared lived around 4,900 years ago.
Yeah.
So, uh, according to the math, the curse is almost up. And like there's more. Like if you want it, I can send it to you. Like I've got a whole sheet where I tell you why I use the numbers I use and why I break it all down. But according to the math, and according to Enoch 10:12, the curse is almost up. But my goal here is not to Baptist preach prophecy at people. I just want to throw that out there. Like I, I've heard that done before. I'm never going to be the guy saying with a street or a sign in the street, saying like repent, the time is near. That I don't care for that kind of stuff. I'm just saying like this is kind of weird for anybody who's interested. There's this 5,000-year-old curse that's looking kind of close.
Wow, man. Wow. I hadn't heard that. Um I guess I've cherry picked through Enoch. I haven't just sat there and read. There's like what, 70 chapters, 71 chapters, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Um I haven't read it all the way through, which I should do that. I should take the rest of this year and just dig in on that. But wow.
But here's a question I'll pose for us and for this episode. What if God allowed Enoch to go into hiding or to be taken out of the Bible or however you want to look at it,
Mhm.
so it can show back up when the time is right for people with the eyes to see and the ears to hear?
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. That isn't that how God works, Uh
And,
man.
and I'll tell people too, like there's in the Bible, there are multiple explanations for there's different numbers for what a generation might be.
Mhm.
I took mine from Psalms 90, where it says 70. Some people say that Psalms 90 could also mean that a generation is 80 years. So I did plug that into this math as well, and that still lines up with us. That would still be possibly in our lifetime. There's also other places in the Bible where it seems to point to a generation being 100 years or even 120 years. So I do want to tell people that, like, I'm not putting it all on this on this theory.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. And the way we count generations now is so weird. It's like 25 or 30 years, you
Yeah.
between uh the baby boomers and Gen X and
Hmm.
millennials. And I think we just stuck generation. I don't know. I think we just use the term probably incorrectly now.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's come to mean something else, Bo. It's like, and two, these people had longer lifespans,
They did. Yes.
and that's another thing. Jared lived to be 900 years,
Right.
so that's why there's a kind of a bigger window when I did the math for this curse, because but I'll tell you this curse, if it's the math that I presented, it lines right up to smack dead in the middle of his lifetime, right in the middle of those 900 years.
Wow.
So, um, I'm just throwing it out there, man. I don't know what to do with that. I found it. I went down that rabbit hole and I decided to do the math and just lay it all out. And that's what I found. People can take it or leave it or whatever. So, but I'll say this, these entities are real.
Yeah.
I'll say that. That's what I really believe. I mean, speaking of Michael Heiser, he used to talk about going on this pagan podcast
Mhm.
because the guy read his stuff and realized that there was a correlation between his pagan Greco-Roman texts and Deuteronomy 32. Um, Basically, the correlation is that the same gods exist in the Bible, that are some of those same gods exist in the Bible that are mentioned in these texts. But here's the deal: that's not to say that these you should follow these pagan texts. I'm just saying they somewhat back up the Bible.
Yes.
If the gods of mythology are real, that's and I think they are, still Bible holds all authority, and we as Christians have to realize that these entities have no authority over us.
Amen. Amen. And I agree with what you're saying 100%. I think I believe, and I've said it to even my students. We get a little bit of downtime. I don't shy away from talking about the faith that these little g gods. I said, yeah, they absolutely were real. They weren't worshiping just a piece of wood or something that they
Yeah.
handmade. I said these gods existed, but you got to know who they were. You know, and I believe that they were the fallen, and they of course wanted to be worshipped. Um, and
And
I don't
maybe
think
they
they're
still want to be worshiped.
yeah, and I don't think they really care what you call them. You can call them Poseidon or Neptune. They don't care. They're being worshipped. You know.
Absolutely. That's key to understand, especially with this Ishtar character.
Mm.
She fits that perfectly, just what you laid out. And I think that she's involved with this whole modern day UFO movement, because that's what I've been kind of finding in my research. But she's been known by many names, and because she was Aphrodite, she was
Mhm.
Ishtar, she was Ashtart, Venus, and Inanna.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
ties her into all of these myths. Like, I think that she was just something different to a whole lot of different groups of people. They just knew her by different names, but it was still the same entity. She Inanna, that ties her in with the Anunnaki of the Sumerian myths.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the names ties her into Baalbek, Lebanon. I think it's Ishtar, where she was known there. So anyway, she goes by many names, and I think she's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now in this manufactured culture war is reminiscent of the old pagan worship of this goddess, Ishtar and Nana. I mean, the Sumerian hymns, she was praised for being able to turn men into women and vice versa. So,
That's
yeah, so
interesting.
yeah, so men who served in the temple of Ishtar had to become androgynous. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
They had to do things. So to become asexual, they had to become androgynous. But so transgenderism, I think, goes back to this priesthood of Inanna. It was really big in Ashtaroth. That was King Og city. He's a Nephilim giant.
Hmm.
So all this stuff is tied in with that. But yeah, I think she's back, man. She's Phoenician. That ties her in with that city Baalbek. And I mentioned Baalbek because it's this city with some of the biggest megalithic watcher precision cut blocks on the planet.
Yes. Yes.
And it's right down the road from Mount Hermon, right down the road from this connection point
Wow.
of watchers to Earth. You can almost trace her back to the scene of the crime.
Yeah. For real.
And it's funny. All kinds of crazy stuff happened to me when I was researching this.
I
That's
bet.
why I prayed last night. I was like, because I had a feeling we were going to get into it today. So I prayed for just peace to be over my house last night, just
Yeah.
coming into this thing. But one of the things that happened when I was first researching this was, I told you I don't like messing around with social media. I just have it because of my show. But like, I was on there and my goal was to get on Instagram, go straight to my messages so I could check my messages and be off. But you know how it is, you go and you still get that one picture at the top of the feed
Yep.
that'll catch your eye. Um, so I did that. And the one picture at the top of my feed that caught my eye was was this picture that the Newkirks from the Hellier series posted,
Yeah.
where they're standing next to a statue in Kentucky, and it's a statue of Venus. And like it was just a real random kind of a post. I read like the description, and they were like, yeah, we're back in Kentucky for the first time since filming, and it's funny to see how things have changed, la di da. Nothing super big there, but they're standing beside this statue of Ishtar in Kentucky. And I'll put it this way, the thought that came through mind was, that's Ashtar in Ashland, Kentucky,
Oh wow.
because that's where they said they were. They were like, they were off the banks of some river in Ashland, Kentucky, and they called her Venus. But I'm like, I know better, right? Because I'm researching this stuff. So it's just another one of these Ashtar connections for me.
Yeah, and I think that was like a little poke in your eye. I think that was for you to see because you
Yeah.
know how that feed comes up at random.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, man. Okay. So
That's how I think this works, Bo. Like,
yeah,
I
me
think that
too.
there's like some strange reverse divination going on with our technology, where these things are able to mess with us through it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's in the natural too. Let me tell you, since you said that, I'll give you one. For me,
Yeah.
it's this Lilith character. Same thing. I have to pray, for protection and peace over my home. But the other day, I love to hunt, and I'm in the woods. I have my shows that I like to listen to, offloaded so I can, play them while I have no cell service and stuff. And there's a new podcast out, and I'll plug it here too. It's called the Dancing Toaster. It's a weird name, but it's a Ghostbuster reference. And the host is a pastor named Nelly, and he does an episode on um, these mothers of demons, and he talks about Lilith. And thankfully, he gave me a shout out, right? And he talks about how I've talked about Lilith before, and I've had my own experiences. And he said, and I when he started talking about me, I stopped my Jeep. I'm on a little logging road, and I just stopped the Jeep to listen to what he had to say. And he said, Bo says there's a connection with owls. And dude, within like 3 to 5 seconds, this owl comes out of a tree right beside my Jeep and just swoops down so I could see it. And I'm like, of course you're listening. Of course you're right here. Um,
Yeah.
and it's constantly like that for me. Constantly.
Oh man. Yeah. I was doing a big thing recently on the Nazis and these occult Nazi connections. And I was up late researching one night, and I was in bed, and I sat up in bed to do something. As soon as I sat up, I thought my house was on fire.
Mm,
I smelled smoke. If you ever burnt something in the oven, that smell when as soon as you open the oven door, it'll hit you.
yeah.
That's what it was like when I sat up in bed. So I jumped out of bed, and I'm running around through my house, and looking for the source of this. And I'm not seeing anything. Nothing's on fire. And then I'm like, was it electrical? So I'm like looking behind the dishwasher and I couldn't find, and here's the thing. I didn't smell it anywhere else in the house. It was just in my bedroom, right next to my head was where I first smelled it. And like something was right beside me, like standing over me. And as I'm as I'm searching the house and I'm realizing, okay, I think this is something to do with what I'm studying.
Yeah.
As soon as I do that, I hear in the uh in the in the living room, which I had just searched for fires, nothing there. The fire alarm beeped a couple times, and my hair stood up because there was nothing in there that was on fire.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, man.
So and that's how this stuff goes, man. It right when you're in that moment where they know that you're going to know. Sometimes they'll do something like they'll swoop an owl down or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I really believe that with all my heart. I believe that, man.
Mm-hmm. So
Let
that's
me ask
why.
you, let me ask you something real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah, go for
Um,
it.
Ishtar,
Yeah.
what does she go by now? Like who is it? Like
Okay.
Beyonce, Taylor Swift? Like who?
With that, I don't know, man. I think she's meddling with human affairs. Uh, well, here, okay. This is what I think she's doing, and I'll break it down. I don't know if she's working with anybody particular like that, but here's not in pop culture, at least not that I've noticed yet, but I have seen her popping up in the UFO thing. Um, she she fits in the Roswell in a few different ways. So she goes back to this year 1947.
Okay.
I just kept coming across thing after thing with this, and it was so. Aleister Crowley dies in 1947.
Hmm.
He has a daughter named Ashtar.
Of course.
Now, a lot of people don't know that, but he was at the Abbey of Flema, and his concubine or whatever got pregnant, and they named that girl Ashtar. So, and Crowley's all about ushering in a new era with little gods. I just see that and I think, but he was channeling before he died, and he was given a cipher by an entity. That cipher is in a book called Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts.
Yep.
I've read it. It gets weird. It
I have
gets
not read
weird.
it.
Uh the idea of the book is if you use the cipher on key UFO cases, you're going to be able to predict the next big case. So, a big part of the book is the author applying Crowley's cipher to cases in the contactee movement that started in 1947.
Wow.
And it ties in with Hellier too, because they talked about this book in Hellier. But
Oh,
in
yeah.
the book, one word in particular kept coming out of the cipher a lot, and it was Ashtar, Phoenician goddess of Babylon. She's everywhere, and it, Parsons, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. Hubbard's the guy who started Scientology. Jack Parsons, in a roundabout way, started NASA. Starting in the year 1946 and ending in 1947, they do the Babylon working in the desert. Many people think that they opened a portal and brought about Roswell. And they documented all this. So I went back and read that. And when they did the main ritual, Parsons wrote that he saw the mystery of Babylon and that she was riding on a beast. He had a vision of that. And that's imagery that's certainly associated with the goddess Ishtar, Ashtar.
Yes.
And as a result of these rituals, Parsons says in his diary, documenting this whole thing, that because of the rituals they did, she was then loosed on the earth in early 1947.
Wow.
And then Roswell happens.
Yeah. It happened in like April. All right. So that's early.
Roswell was, I think it was June or July.
Was it?
So April, May, June or July. I think it was June or July.
Okay.
But this happened before that in like early January, I think.
Wow.
because I went back and checked the dates, man. Because I wanted to see if they actually really did that ritual that's like famous now.
Yeah,
And yeah, it predates Roswell. And yeah, they did a majority of those rituals in 1946, but Parsons was told do this final ritual and then wait X amount of months. And that's when this will be loosed on the earth. And it was this goddess Ishtar,
man.
which was 1947. And like, there's another connection I found too. And like, I wasn't looking for this stuff either, man. Like, this stuff just kept coming up in like random research I was doing for random podcasts. I would be like this one here, like, with George Van Tassel, in the same desert of California that Parsons and Hubbard were out there. Also in 1947, George Van Tassel up and leaves his nice cushy job at Lockheed, and he just ditches the aerospace business to live out in the Mojave Desert where they're doing this. He moves out there the same time Parsons and Hubbard are there, but he doesn't know them. It just lined up. But
Right.
what he did in the desert, he went on to build a house and establish a large UFO center there in the desert. It became one of the most successful and well-known UFO meeting centers of all time. And it's still there to this day. But Van Tassel claimed to receive messages while he was there from an extraterrestrial interdimensional being named Ashtar.
Uh,
And
why are they going to the desert? Is it because it's like the waterless places? Is this
yeah,
where the demons go?
man, that's a good question. I think I don't know. There's something about the desert that maybe it goes back to like I don't know. That might be a stretch, but like Azazel was locked up in the desert. Maybe it's just something to do with where it's at.
Could be.
The deserts are just kind of strange. They're almost like spiritual in a strange way.
They are. There's a lot of weird.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But the contactee movement coming out of 1947, I would come to find includes all these other types of encounters with Ashtar and with what they call like the Ashtar Command. And in fact, they actually started calling it the Ashtar movement at one point. So it became this prominent form of a UFO religion.
Wow.
And it all comes out of this year, 1947. And you cut to modern day, which is what I think you were kind of asking me about a second ago. There's a guy named Chris Bledsoe.
Yep.
Okay, so you know who he is. He's in North Carolina. He's not far from us.
Yeah.
Uh, he channels these things. He brings them down. Uh, I think what he says is he can channel UFOs and bring them down from wherever. But he talks about the source of all this being a divine feminine figure.
Yeah. I read his book.
Okay, so that to me, that I don't know, that kind of points back to this Ashtar figure for me.
Yeah. I see that.
I mean, I don't know, what do you think about him? I've seen some footage where it's like it looks like he's actually bringing these things down.
Well, I'll tell you this. I read the book because somebody that listens to the show insisted that I read the book and they sent it to me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
so
I hear
I
you.
read it and I was like, okay, he's messing with some things. He is greatly deceived.
Mm,
Um, yeah, he's talking to demons.
okay.
And I just kind of left it at that. I didn't dig into him. Um,
I hear you. That's why I asked. I mean, I appreciate that honest response, man. I, I don't know because I haven't read it, but it when you start looking into this stuff, you have a little bit of research stamina behind you, like we do because we podcast, we kind of have to.
yeah,
Uh, you will find that some of these UFO people behind the surface, there does seem to be something there that's a little sketchy, a little occulty, a little like channeling entities, like, and I just think the more and more I'm looking at this, I think that Ashtar is behind this UFO business, in my opinion.
yeah. Is there a connection with Dr. Stephen Greer and Ashtar? Have you looked at that?
No, that's a good, not that I've seen, but I mean, I haven't looked either. Who knows?
Right. Because he's all about the channeling.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
Of,
CE5. Yeah.
yeah, dude. They go
Yep.
out there and who is it, Demi Lovato or somebody now, like some kind of famous face to put on it. They go out there and pray or focus their in one mind and one accord, one mind and one accord. They come together and agree that they want this thing to show up, and then these lights start showing up.
Well, I'll say this about the CE5 like programs. I was looking into a whistleblower last year, UFO whistleblower. It got, he came out on Reddit, and I was able to catch it before they took it down. He went on Reddit and said, "Hey, I work for this facility. I did this. I'm going to spill the beans on here. You guys can ask me whatever questions you want." He basically just Q&A'd
Nice.
his whistleblower thing. 2 to 3 days later, Reddit just takes it all down. But one of the things he talked about was he talked a lot about compartmentalization. And so he worked in some sort of a UFO government research facility where they had a craft there, but everything was compartmentalized. Like he wasn't allowed to go into all the rooms and stuff like that, but he was working alongside of a little group of Mormons that they brought in to who were doing a form of this CE5. They were mentally bringing down crafts, and that was the whole reason why they use them, because the CIA pulls out of Utah. They pull out of the Mormon community big
I,
time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's that. What's that? Brigham Young
Yeah.
University.
Yeah.
That's where they get all their recruits, man. They like the Mormons because they're good with secrets, they're good with structure, and in this case, this guy said that they liked this Mormon group because they had a spiritual connection
Hmm.
that aided in somehow channeling and doing like Greer type stuff. And he said one of the Mormon ladies got uh, disciplined because she was at a bonfire off the clock, and she had a couple beers, and she brought a UFO down at this bonfire where there were people there from just the public.
What?
Yeah, and so she got fired or heavily disciplined in this program. I thought that was crazy.
That is nuts.
It's crazy too, because these I like the whistleblowers that don't get there's several types of people. Not everybody's going to go out there and David Grush this thing.
Right.
Not everybody wants lights, camera, action. Some people don't want book deals, and they don't want public speaking, agreements and stuff like that. Some of these guys just want to get off their chest
Yeah.
because they're involved with these black programs. And I really do believe that exists.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So this guy, I mean, I went through, man, with a fine tooth comb, and I just looked for any indication that he was uh BSing, that
Yeah.
he was telling tales, fibbing. And I didn't get any red flags from this guy. As crazy as that story is, Bo, I didn't get any red flags that this guy was making stuff up,
Right.
because they put their life on the line to do this.
Yes, they
Some
do.
of these guys, especially if you come out quiet like that and you don't do it with big people in the UFO community right beside you, and senators and congressmen, if you don't have those people standing by your side, you run the risk of getting taken out in the middle of the night still.
For sure.
So
For sure. And so it's kind of an obvious question, but let me ask you just for sure. Are you of the mindset? And I think about uh, the demon that Aleister Crowley worked with. I can't remember its name, but it looked just like a gray alien.
yeah, yeah.
Um, are you of the mindset that aliens are, and again, Tim Alberino split hairs, and it aggravated me so bad. He's like, I'm not. You can't say aliens or demons. Demonic, yes, but not demons. I'm like, same origin, buddy. Same origin. Uh, are you of that mindset that aliens are demons slash demonic, or are they just remnant, some kind of species from possibly Rahab?
Mm. Well, I've never been the guy who said that UFOs or aliens are fallen angels. I've never come out and just said that, but I'm starting to think that there's a connection there. One of the stories that comes to mind is Whitley Strieber talks about being on a ship. I think he did it with hypnotic regression or something like that, but he talked about going on a ship and remote viewing, I think is what he was doing. And he went on board and he sees these what he called shell suits of gray aliens, suits like they're just avatars, like, or I had the thought maybe they're biological robots, but like they're just constructed army.
Yes.
And then I feel like if that's going on, maybe that does fit into the return of the days of Noah, like we're talking about earlier. And and maybe these deities do have alien armies that they're doing behind the scenes. Because if these watchers got out, or if they're about to be out, I do think they're going to gear up for war, and part of that's going to be constructing an army. And I think even John Keel, later on, he got to a point where he started to see the UFO phenomenon as a spiritual thing, and he would start like angels in the Bible, similar to angels in the Bible. He used that analogy a couple of times. So I think he even started to associate this with fallen angels. Maybe he said it in so fewer words, but so I'm not, I don't know yet exactly what's happening. But if I had to guess, I'd say that some of these fallen are behind the scenes, they're up to something. And I think it involves UFOs and aliens for sure.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think it does too. Um, I'm of the mindset that, and my wife just texted me. I want to give you a heads up. If I have to hop off here real quick, please forgive me.
No
But
worries.
this isn't the first time it's happened. But my wife is at a ladies' fellowship meeting at church, and they might need me
Okay.
to come up and talk with somebody.
Okay.
So
Well, if you
if
gotta go, you gotta go. I'm
yeah,
okay.
I don't usually check my text messages, but if it's my wife,
Mm-hmm.
the world stops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm kind of the mindset at this point that some of these things that we see, these lights that we see, what we look at and we think are craft of some sort, and talk about far fetched. I'm kind of thinking that we might be looking at actual biological entities, um, or maybe not biological as we understand it, but we might not be watching uh, a metal craft pulling 2,000 G's. We might be looking at an entity of some sort, a thing, and it's that's its body. That's the actual thing moving like that. It's not uh, something built by hands. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's alive. It's
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
um,
I've thought that too. And I do think that some of these orbs that you see that people attribute to be UFOs, they seem a lot like paranormal orbs. Like, and I think that that is some sort of an entity too. I had a guy on, he's a Bigfoot researcher from Canada, and he'll go out and he'll film, himself in the woods, and he'll slow down the reel whenever something weird flies by, because he thinks he's seeing, fairies and stuff like that that are out there.
Right.
He thinks he's picking up on these other type of earth entities, I guess. But one of his videos, he slowed down, this orb goes by and it's got a person's face in the orb perfectly, a
Wow.
face, like as if that's some sort of a spiritual technology for something to move around in our atmosphere is to become an orb with a face. I don't know, like, and then, he's also picked up some crazy stuff. It's like the woods are alive. I know this is kind of a whole other topic, but like woodland spirits and stuff like that. I think it's all part of the spiritual realm. You know, I had the deep sense when I was a kid, when I first watched Lord of the Rings, that's how the earth used to be.
Yep.
Giants and Bigfoot and little people and Native American spirits and just fairies, dwarfs, all that stuff. And too, I know that's broad, but like I mentioned CERN earlier, and I think it's worth mentioning too. I think it has a place in this conversation that somebody over there is treating that technology like a quantum Ouija board. They're putting questions over into another dimension to see what answers come back, just like a Ouija board. And it's like science becoming the seance again, like it was back in the day during the Lord of the Rings times.
Amen.
So they're just so they're just so anti-God that they won't admit to this. They keep it hush hush. They act like nothing's spiritual's going on. They act like it's just another day in the life of a Darwinian scientist. Nothing to see here. But their stuff's happening over there. It's not just, like I said earlier, it's not just internet rumor. People have come out and they have blown the whistle on CERN bringing in entities down there in the basement of that place. There was a scientist, well-respected scientist over there in Switzerland. She went to the University of Geneva, I think. She came out and said that sometimes the entities would leave stuff behind. It's at CERN. They'd come through the portal. When they left, they'd sometimes leave items behind.
What?
Yeah. Educated woman with like a doctorate. She hangs out, goes to dinner with people who work at CERN. And just those are the stories that are coming out of that place, man.
Wow. Yes, CERN's weird, dude. Like they
It
are
is.
openly merging spiritual and scientific. They have these ceremonies and rituals, and then they have the goddess of destruction
Yeah.
statue standing there. They're not doing a good job of hiding it if that's what
They're
they're
not
trying to
hiding
do.
it. It's on part of CERN sits on the old temple of Apollo. Eh, You
Really?
look in, yeah. If you look into, yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
it's,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah. If you look into the local legend further, the locals consider that place to be a gateway to the underworld before they even put CERN there. And if you think to Revelation 9:11, the name of the angel of the bottomless pit in Greek is Apollo, and in Roman it's Abaddon. And you
Hmm.
see those two used interchangeably throughout the Bible, but it points back to this Apollo. And it's basically the king of the bottomless pit that has all these creatures that are going to come out in the end days. So again, it's like, is there something to the curse in Enoch, right? Because Apollyon is sometimes considered to be Semyaza.
Yep.
Semyaza is, of course, this entity who the curse was originally placed on, who's going to be let out at some point, and they want chaos when they get out. And and if you read further into Revelation 9, um, when the bottomless pit opens and the locusts come out,
Hmm.
they torture people for like 5 months. But in verse 7, it says their faces were like human faces, and they had hair like women's hair and teeth like lions.
Yes.
Those aren't locusts.
No.
Those are demons.
Yes. Is it?
It's like Mothman with a human face, the way it reads.
Yeah, man. It is. And do you think locust is a bad translation? Do you think it is just mean like a swarm of these things?
Well, yeah, I kind of do, because it goes on to say that their wings sounded like horses and chariots rushing into battle. That's not going to be a locust.
Right. Yeah.
But
Some people say
I
that's a
see what you're
helicopter.
saying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that, man. There's that Isaiah verse that talks about the habitation of jackals, but you look in the Masoretic and it says habitation of dragons.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, maybe it's a bad translation. It's like somebody, man, I hate to go there because I don't want to tick people off, because I don't know why certain things are left out or taken out or translated. I don't know why. I can't tell people why, but all I know is that it seems like somewhere down the line somebody went through and kind of censored a couple words.
Yeah. Well, it's like saying um Jonah swallowed by a whale. You know, it wasn't a whale.
Yeah.
It's like saying in Isaiah talks about hairy goats and was it the night monster or the screech owl, and Septuagint will tell you it's like satyrs and Lilith. Um,
Yeah,
Septuagint mentions
absolutely.
sirens. These things are real. They whatever whatever word that they had at the time to translate it into. Let's hope and pray it wasn't intentional.
The owl,
Yeah,
sometimes that could possibly mean Lilith, right? In the
yeah,
scriptures.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One translation will say owl, one will
Mhm.
say night monster, and then one says Lilith. Psalm 91. I will not be afraid of the terror by night. The night terror is
Mhm.
the night monster. It's the Lilith. It's the same. The terror by night, arrow that flies by day. All those verses, they're like verses 5, 6, 7, whatever.
Mhm.
Those are the names of demons. You know,
Yeah.
and they're capitalized in the Septuagint. It's like,
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why it could be in the alchemical texts. Metals have their counterpart association with planets. So sometimes when you're reading through a book like Paracelsus or something like that, he'll be going on and on about like 10, but he's talking about whatever the Saturn or whatever the planet is that represents 10.
yeah,
So in the Bible too, I wonder if some of these insects or other creatures have their counterpart demon that they're associated with in the ancient world for whatever reason. It's like these people too, uh, they had enough sense not to mention these things by name, so they replaced it with another name.
could be. It could be contextually speaking. The reader at the time might have known what they were referring to.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And like Enoch, man, like I know it goes back to this conversation about why did it go missing in, I think, the 5th century out of the Bible. And well, you got to think they're listing off this 20 actual names of demons in there.
Yeah.
Naming them right out. And that's dangerous stuff. If you're an Aleister Crowley type, somebody might take that list and try to start getting in touch, making phone calls, making
Right.
the esoteric phone calls, trying
Yeah.
to. So there's a reason probably why some of this stuff was maybe not mentioned or changed. And and also I think the closer you get to our timeline, the more people stop believing in dragons and fallen angels and some of this stuff. Like I think there was probably a group of people, Christians maybe at one point, who thought it would be better to maybe take some of that out and make the message of the Bible more clear cut and dry, and maybe take out, because dragons were in there, in my opinion, like Bel and the dragon. I don't know if you know about that, but that was like a extension of the book of Daniel, and it was about a king who had a pet dragon. That's not in there anymore. So, and I'm telling you, man, if you read Job, oh, what is it? One of the latter chapters of Job, it talks about Leviathan, sure, but it also talks about another creature that is straight up a dragon, I think.
Is it the behemoth?
No, maybe, yeah, maybe. But the way it reads, Bo, it sounds like it's a big giant sea serpent that can like spew flames, and it can heat up the waters.
Yeah.
And it talks about how even like I think it even makes a mention of like how people, or maybe even a fallen angel, can't they shiver in its presence because they know they can't defeat it.
Wow. Wow.
But it sounds like a dragon to me.
Yeah.
So,
man,
we're talking about the return of the little G gods, though. At the end of the day, they might bring these alien armies with them, just to, I just want to throw that in there. And I don't know.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I am going to have to hop off here. My wife says she'd feel much better if I could just be there. Unfortunately, it's like a 30-minute drive, and I don't
That's
mind.
okay, bud.
If it's for the Lord, I don't mind. So,
yeah.
Tim, before we hop off, can you go ahead and plug anything and everything you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a war for the mind, folks. So this book, Bible, it will help you ward off deception. It's encoded with the keys that will unlock the doors to understanding for you. And so if there's anything I'm trying to get across today, it's that. So, but I'm Tim Constantine. My podcast is Six Sensory Podcast. I spell it out SIX. I don't use the number 6. You can find me on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and I've got a shadow banned Instagram account, but I love to have people come over there and follow me.
Shadow banned Instagram account. Yeah. Yeah. Brother, I know that there's tons more we can get into and keep going on. And this is like the third show I've had to stop short lately. My life is not my own. I can't do anything about that.
It's okay, man. I'm happy we were able to get at least an hour. So
yeah, me too, man. Me too. But yeah, if you would do me the honors of coming back on, maybe in a couple weeks, and we can dig in, we can pick up where we left off, and I want to go into CERN hard if you're down for that.
Oh, I've got plenty more on that.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I'd love to come on and do that, man. If you want to do a CERN episode, let's do it, or we'll talk in between and we'll figure it out, man.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, email me. I'll holler at you. And again, I hate to cut this short, bro, but
no worries.
I gotta run.
No, that's okay, man. We'll do it again. So we're good.
All right, brother. Well, you have a good night. God bless.